Hey Todd, I was watching your 3-minute dump in our community, and I had to pause halfway through because I was just really feeling your discouragement about what's going on in your marriage. And I wanted to explain something to you that I think will go a long way in helping you understand both where you are and how to move through this season of your marriage, but also just to see things differently. So in all disillusioned marriages, actually all marriages will get here eventually, but especially a sexless marriage, you have this problem called enmeshment. So I'm going to draw a picture of this to the best I can, okay? And so you have to forgive my simple thing here. You have you, and you have your wife, okay? You and your wife, circles. And the problem is you have things that you want. Now I'm just going to simulate this with a bullet list that you each have. I'm not going to put the items because everybody's a little different. So here's your list of wants, needs, and desires, and here's your wife's wants, needs, and desires. And when you're experiencing enmeshment in marriage, you're under the belief that the other person is the person that gives you these, and because they're the person that's responsible to give them to you, if you don't have your needs met, it's their problem. Now, you see how the inside of this looks like mesh? That's a great way to remember that. Enmeshment is when I believe that what I want, need, and desire is my partner's responsibility, and they believe the same thing about me. And so here's one of the hardships about this. You can see this is bi-directional, right? When you're enmeshed, when you're entangled, the problem is you're each trying to get from the other person exactly the same thing. You're trying to get your needs met. She's trying to get her needs met. And you get caught in a gridlock where you say, well, I can't meet your needs. I don't have my needs met because you're not giving them to me. And it's round and round and round and round the mulberry bush. This is the nature and the problem with enmeshment. Enmeshment is all based on mutual dependency on the other person for things that feel vital. And so you've been working really hard on this, and this is really admirable. And while you're doing that with a wife who at this point still believes that the things that she deeply needs, which are to feel appreciated, to feel seen and heard, and to feel accepted, that they come from you, right? Now, here's the thing. Those are actually all just canaries in a coal mine. They're the tip of icebergs to deeper needs that you simply cannot, no matter how hard you try, meet them. Because they're needs that are existential. They're needs that are about our sense of self. You can never, nor should you ever, give another human being their sense of self. And so what's happening here is you keep trying. You keep trying to produce the right formula in yourself that will finally make your wife happy. And I'm going to tell you this right now. It will never, ever happen. You might occasionally intersect with some behavior of yours with some good feeling from her, but as long as you make it your mission to make her happy, you're completely missing the point. Something else needs to happen, right? What needs to happen is this mesh needs to be torn out. And I'm going to draw, I wish I had another color. I'm going to go another approach. And I'm going to put you on the one side here, and it's going to be this, that you're going to learn to meet your own internal needs. You're going to self-source those. That means we're going to replace this enmeshment, this dependency, with self-reliance, which means you learn to look within yourself for things like approval, connection, a sense of wholeness, a sense of well-being, a sense of appreciation, respect, value, confidence, everything. But I want you to notice something. While you have this here, your partner does not yet have that. And this is where you're getting stuck. You have done great work to self-source and do some self-reliance. But there's a natural thing that happens in the grand timeline of these relationships where you're going to have to do this for a while under some pressure and duress, because your partner is going to say, where's my stuff? You're not doing it right. If you would just show up differently, I would finally feel whole. I would finally feel better on my insides. That, I'm just going to be straight up authentic and direct, is just codependency. You're not responsible for other human beings' emotions. They are. And in all marriages, there's some degree of this, and it results in what the popular author David Snarch calls normal marital sadism, which is when you hand your partner your internal frustration, your own dilemma, the dilemmas that come with having values and wants and desires that are in conflict with one another. And rather than own them, you just hand them to your partner and say, you deal with these. And until you do, there will be no intimacy. There'll be no relationship. Man, this is super, super, super frustrating. But is there a way out? Yes. The way out is to keep tearing out the dependency that you have. Keep tearing out the enmeshment and build it instead to self-reliance. You must continue to be self-reliant. Now, here's what's also happening, and the hard part about this is you're trying to relate to her. You're experiencing her hard emotions towards you for not meeting her needs because she is still enmeshed, even though you're working on not being enmeshed. This becomes very uncomfortable for the other partner. It feels like abandonment. It feels like you're doing a lousy job. It feels like you're a lousy husband. It feels like you're a lousy lover. And when you're experiencing that, it's discouraging. And this is why we have you do this in a community where we can encourage you to just hang in there for a little while. Because what happens, and I'll draw some images for this, is she needs to experience this. But right now, when she says, I'm unhappy, I'm unhappy, I'm unhappy, what you do is you start reconnecting the enmeshment, and you start trying to control and manipulate and do good things and make her happy. And so you start reestablishing the connections that you're trying to break. And the evidence of this is that when a woman's emotion makes your emotion change, you are enmeshed. If you are enmeshed, it's the same thing as dependency, which means you're having an internal emotional response because of her emotions. That's unhealthy. And this is actually something people in this spot think is normal. They don't know that you can live atomically emotionally. Now, that does not mean apathy. My wife would be the first person to tell you I am nothing even close to apathetic. And that I'm a deeply compassionate, empathetic, curious, and loving man. And I have no emotional entanglement with her. And so when she's frustrated, even if she's blaming me, because I know who I am and I know who she is, I can just say, wow, she's really frustrated. And she's using explanations right now maybe that are blaming, but it's really not me. I know this is not about me. Right? And this goes back to one of the principles that we've talked about from the 4 agreements. It's about learning not to take things personally. This is the moment you do it. When a woman is raging and roaring at you for not meeting her needs, you want to be open-minded. You want to, of course, look at yourself and say, is there anything I need to grow in here? That's just part of being a mature person, is evaluating, is there any way I need to grow? But when somebody says, I'm unhappy and it's your fault, you also have to have the presence of personhood to say, wait a minute, you're making personal what's personal to you. You're making it about me. And you have to be able to inwardly kind of say, well, I know that's not true. I'm not going to defend myself. I'm just going to let them, get it out, stew on it. What happens in time if you're patient for a little while, and I know you've been at this a long time, but it's not about calendaration about how long you've been doing it. It's about how long you have reliably and consistently lived without enmeshment and dependency yourself. That's the time that matters, and you got to do that for a solid, in my opinion, 3 to 6 months before it really actually is effective. If you do that, what we hope happens, and there's no guarantee, is that your wife starts to, I'm going to write this down, she starts to learn to self-source too. One primary reason she'll do that is because her attempts to get things from you don't work. You don't do anything to try to placate her neediness, her own insecurity. We can't fix each other's insecurity. We can sometimes offer compassion and empathy, and we can be with one another in insecurity. But the deepest insecurities we have as humans cannot be solved by other humans, because what we're really insecure about is that maybe there's something deeply wrong with us, and one human can't tell another human what their value and worth is. And I promise you, that's what's behind this. So there's a little bit of a timeline I want you to be aware of, and I'm going to do this by 4 lines. So the first step, and I reliably see this in other men, this is not conjecture, this is something that I've seen work with quite a few men. The first step in the journey is your self-acceptance of you. You must deeply accept you and come to the place where you know you're whole. No matter what your wife says, no matter what accusation or blame, you must know yourself. This is about clarity of person. Okay, that's the first step. That means you come to a place where your regard for yourself is unconditional. That means you end an internal way of loving yourself based on eros, and you start to love yourself with agape, which means an unconditional regard, that you stop judging and belittling yourself when you don't show up the way you like, and that you continue to believe the best about yourself, that you give yourself some grace, some compassion, some empathy, etc. That's step number 1. Okay, I'll write that down. 1. The second step, and this is why this first one has to be there first, is that you begin to love your partner with the same kind of love, which means you replace eros love for her with agape. You stop making your love for her conditional based on her behavior and her emotional temperature towards you, and you love her instead openly based on your values. You're warm, you're compassionate, you're curious, you're kind, right? You're accepting and non-judgmental. Now, that does not mean you don't do that with boundaries. You absolutely must. It means that your reason for showing regard for someone is no longer sourced in them, but sourced in you, in your heart. Who do I like to be? What do my values dictate of me? That's what it means to love with unconditional high regard. That means when I love you, I'm not using your behavior to determine the kind of love that I show you. Otherwise, you actually control your love, not me. And I'm not doing anything other than basically spitting back to you what you do to me. When I love you based on my value system, now I'm exercising an ownership form or a self-reliant form of love. It says, I'm going to love you based on my rules for that. And my rules are, I'm going to love you whatever your behavior is. Now, I'm not talking about mushiness and like I'm just going to overlook all behavior. It just means I'm not going to change my regard for you. We'll do another video about what that means, because unconditional high regard is a complicated subject that is misunderstood by tons of people, especially trolling, immature, boyish men on the internet. So I don't want to do that in this video. Step number 3, I'm going to use a different color, is that your partner then starts to go through a period of self-acceptance, the same kind. She has to replace her eros love for herself with an unconditional high regard for herself. Last step, step 4, is that she starts to show you unconditional high regard. Now, that is a linear time frame. The reason I did it like this is you see how there's some overlap. What men want to do all the time is they want all of those to happen in sequence. It's because that's the nature of dependency. Dependency tries to do all 4 steps in tandem, because it says, well, I don't want to move if you don't move. And that's conditional love. Conditional love says, I'm not doing anything by my own volition. I'm only going to do it by you. And you're back in gridlock. Okay? So when you break the idea of dependency, you break the idea of eros, you start loving a person by your value system after you have started to love yourself that way. You go back to this timeline that I'm talking about. I would personally, hold on. I would plan on that taking, when you're getting good at that, I would say 12 to 18 months. Now that's the worst marketing message in the world, but it's authentic and it's real. Meaning when I work with guys with this and they need a good bit of hand-holding because this is very, very, very challenging, that's the kind of time frame it takes. Is it effective? 100%, yeah. Now, when I say that, I don't mean that as like 100% of men. I just mean this is very, very, very sound with the men that do this. They end up getting crystal clear about their own value and worth. They break their dependency and enmeshment. They learn to hold that space, which is when you prove to yourself that you really do love unconditionally. Because let's face it, if you want to say, I'm an unconditional lover, how do you prove that? How do you test that? You love somebody who's not loving you at the moment. Now, all kinds of people are going to light up the comments and say that's weakness or something. That is the stupidest thing ever. The hardest thing on planet Earth, and therefore the thing that requires more strength of character and will than anything on planet Earth, is to love somebody who's giving you no reason to do so. You know why that's hard and why it requires strength? Because the only source of love then is self, to come from me, which means I have to have a pretty deep and big well to love someone who's not loving me back. That works. That generally will lead a relationship to one of two places. Either really, really deep, profound connection and intimacy, or the dissolution of a relationship because loving yourself begins to make very apparent that it makes no sense to continue that relationship. Either way, you win because you became yourself, you deeply accepted yourself, you put off the dependency, eros, entangled love, and you learn to stand on your own 2 feet and like the guy in the mirror. If that resonates with you and you want to talk more about it, I invite you to reach out. If you're watching this video and you're not Todd, but you're like, man, I gotta find out more about that, I want you to scroll down. You'll see a link. You can connect with me. I'll talk to you more about this kind of pattern of healing very complicated sexless marriages. And with that, I'll wish you a good day. Take care.